The Academy of Raya Lucaria. Standing on a column of stone, high above the waters of Liurnia, Raya Lucaria is a grand vision of Gothic architecture. A structure that invites all with an aptitude for Glintstone sorceries into its walls, to uncover the mysteries of magic and the cosmos, in cooperation with one's fellow scholars and magicians. From a distance, with its bright stone walls and inviting architecture, the Academy of Raya Lucaria appears like something out of a storybook, as welcoming as a romantic fairy tale castle. Within the Academy, however, an artificial gloominess permanently shrouds the sky, giving the Academy a more mysterious, even foreboding or occult look. This almost gives the appearance of nighttime, which is very appropriate within these walls, for the Academy's sorcerers study the stars and the power they contain. So, keeping a sort of artificial night always above oneself allows the source of a sorcerer's power to ever be remembered. We have very little direct evidence about the Academy's founding, how or when it was built, who founded it, and so on. But we can look at some circumstantial evidence for clues. For example, why was the Academy built in this specific spot? Well, it's likely because Liurnia contains the motherlode of all mineral deposits, which is visible deep underground below the Academy in the lake of rot emerging from the ceiling. This strange crystal is called Glintstone, and Glintstone contains the power of stars. It is the focus through which a sorcerer channels their magic, and without Glintstone, there can be no sorcery. The fledgling Academy no doubt wanted large quantities of the stuff for their new school, making Liurnia the perfect spot in which to build. There are also glintstone crystal deposits everywhere in Liurnia. You can't throw a rock without hitting one. And there's also crystal mining operations run by the Academy to keep it well supplied with glintstone. The Raya Lucaria crystal tunnel, for instance, is full of glintstone miners, stone-skinned people who use their sorcerer's staves as drills to mine glintstone. We can look at 3 particular items for some lore about these rocky humanoids. The digger's staff of a sorcerer miner who extracts glintstone from crystal tunnels. The staff itself is a tool used to mine, and the ferrule is also embedded with a glintstone. Shatter Earth, one of the glintstone sorceries of the Academy of Raya Lucaria, imbues the ferrule of the caster's staff with magic, then thrusts it into the ground to create a magical shockwave. A stone digger sorcery used by the glintstone miners of the crystal tunnel. At the Academy, use of this sorcery was a stigma that marked out failed scholars. Crystal knife, a knife made by sharpening hard crystal, signature weapon of glintstone miners, used as a tool to extract glintstone from broken rock, and as such, a faint magic enwreathes the blade. Something interesting here is the implication that these glintstone miners were once students at Raya Lucaria who flunked out, drawing from the line that the unique sorcery they use is a mark of a failed scholar. If these miners were failed students, I wonder why they would be willing to go work in the Academy's mines. Perhaps it was seen as a way to one day earn one's place back in the school. I couldn't say. We'll come back to these miners at the end of the video, but let's return to the Academy for now. Continuing to theorize about the founding of the Academy, one interesting note is that we can reasonably speculate that it was not originally called the Academy of Raya Lucaria. In the original Japanese text, my understanding is that the school's name means something like the Sorcerer School of the Carrion Royals or the Royal Carrion Magic Academy. I don't speak Japanese, but I fed the original Japanese through a number of translators online to confirm this, and it seems to be accurate. I'll explain what Carrion Royal Family means in more detail later, but all we need to know now is that they are a royal family of sorcerers. And there's lore stating that the Queen of the Carrions took over the Academy as its governor. So, we know that the Academy existed before the Carrion Queen took over, and we can assume that if the school is currently named after its Carrion rulers, then it would not have had that name before the Carrions took over. As for what its name was prior to that takeover, I have no idea. But let's return to the modern day. Whether you approach the school from below, trudging through the ruins of the sinking town that was built around it, or from the high road to the northeast that travels toward the Altus Plateau, you will come to a magical barrier blocking your entrance. The sorcerer Thops, a seemingly inept mage trapped outside the Academy's walls, explains why these barriers are in place, saying, "After they declared they wouldn't interfere with the shattering, the Academy cast repelling seals on the east gate, leading to the capital, and the south gate, leading here. As you might have guessed, the seals are still active, making entry to the Academy impossible without a Glintstone key." This is an interesting bit of information. We know that the shattering is the war that tore apart the lands between after Queen Marika shattered the Elden Ring. The land's demigods brought the world to ruin as they each competed for power, claiming shards of the Elden Ring for themselves. According to Thops, the Academy decided to just stay out of this war, sealing their gates and not interfering in the demigods' magical power struggles. As it turns out, the Academy had had a power struggle of its own to deal with. A full-on civil war between the sorcerers to determine control of the Academy. So perhaps they weren't eager to get into the middle of another war. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll return to that civil war later. let's continue laying the Academy's groundwork, starting with one of the strangest things about the Academy, their crowns. One of the first things a newcomer to Raya Lucaria will notice are the strange uniforms of the sorcerers there. Their flowing robes are perhaps expected or even stereotypical for mages, but the huge stone helmets they wear over their heads are much more likely to draw a raised eyebrow, shall we say. These stone headpieces are called Glintstone crowns, and they serve multiple functions. First, they have a practical application, as the crowns are inset with Glintstone, the colored stone which, as I said earlier, serves as the foundation of a sorcerer's magical abilities. Whether because of this glintstone or some other enchantment on the crown, wearing the helmet increases one's intelligence, allowing for the casting of more powerful spells. Besides this practical purpose, the different glintstone crown designs also signify the Conspectus to which a sorcerer belongs. At Raya Lucaria, a conspectus is the field of study or specialization chosen by a sorcerer, and the mask is carved in the shape of that conspectus's founder, denoting the wearer's chosen conspectus. You can think of the conspectuses like colleges within a university. In the real world, at least in America, where I'm from, if you attend university, you are going to end up in a specific college within that university, such as the College of Communications or the College of Fine Arts. These are specialized departments within the university that focus on a specific field of study. So, if we translated the practice of the conspectus crowns to real life, it would be like if a music major at school walked around wearing a big stone helmet carved with Beethoven's face, or if economics majors wore Adam Smith masks. Gaining entrance into one of these conspectuses must be earned by merit, as we find the unimpressive sorcerer Thops, regarded as an unpromising student, going bareheaded. Additionally, the conspectus scroll item reads, "A sorcery scroll from the Academy of Raya Lucaria details superior sorceries taught to scholars worthy of donning the stone crown and studying a certain conspectus." And the swift glintstone shard spell reads in part, "One of the glintstone sorceries of the Academy of Raya Lucaria. Those unworthy of the stone crown typically end their brief journey into sorcery here." So we know that only proficient sorcerers were worthy of wearing glintstone crowns, and novice sorcerers like Thops were not allowed to wear them. There seems to be 5 conspectuses in Raya Lucaria, or at least 5 that we know of. The Carlos Conspectus, the Aldivinus Conspectus, the Hierotus Conspectus, the Haima Conspectus, and the Lazuli Conspectus. Let's look at what we know about each of them. First up is the Carlos Conspectus. Let's look at the relevant items. Carlos Glintstone crown, one of the Glintstone crowns bestowed upon Raya Lucaria scholars whose pursuits were deemed worthy. Increases intelligence to the detriment of stamina. The Carlos Conspectus is the oldest of the Academy's lineages of study, begat by the sorcerer Azure. Scholars who follow in his footsteps pursue the mysteries of comets. Glintstone Comet Shard, one of the Glintstone sorceries of the Academy of Raya Lucaria, fires a magical comet with a trailing tail. A sorcery of the Carlos Conspectus, the most venerable of the Academy. So, from these two items we learn that the Carlos Conspectus is the oldest and most venerable conspectus at the Academy, that it was created by the sorcerer Azure, and that sorcerers of this conspectus studied comets. As I said before, the Glintstone crowns are carved in the shape of their respective conspectuses' founder, or maybe at least a significant figure related to that conspectus. It's not 100% clear. And we can find the face of Azure in portraits around Raya Lucaria. Compare those portraits to the Carlos Glintstone crown, and you can see the similarity. In dialogue with the Sorceress Sellen, a character we meet in the game, we learn that Azure is a founding Glintstone sorcerer, suggesting that he was one of the first Glintstone sorcerers, perhaps. Next, let's look at the Olivinus Conspectus. Olivinus Glintstone crown increases intelligence to the detriment of HP. The lineage of the Olivinus Conspectus began with the sorcerer Lucet, and its adherents continue his study of meteors. Glintstone stars, one of the Glintstone sorceries of the Academy of Raya Lucaria. A sorcery of the Olivinus Conspectus, which attracts sorcerers from Seria, town of sorcery. From these items, we learn that the Olivinus Conspectus was created by the sorcerer Lucet, that it focuses on the study of meteors, and that it was a favorite of sorcerers from Celia, a town we can find in Caelid, which is full of invisible sorcerers. And just like with Azure, we can see Lucet's face in the portraits around Raya Lucaria, and compare it to his Conspectus crown. We learn from Sorceress Sellen that Lucet is also a founding Glintstone sorcerer, just like Azure. And allow me a small detour from the Conspectuses here, because, interestingly, the three spells that are explicitly Olivinus related, meaning Glintstone stars, Star Shower, and Stars of Ruin, do not refer directly to meteors in their spell descriptions, but rather say that they summon shooting stars, which in the real world are meteors that fall into the Earth's atmosphere and burn up, producing a streak of light across the night sky. Shooting stars are also called falling stars, so when the Olivinus Conspectus is said to study meteors, we can also take that to mean they study shooting stars. In Elden Ring, however, falling stars have a very different nature, unrelated to our real-world explanation. Let's look at a few item descriptions. is. This legendary incantation is the most ancient of those that derive from the Erd tree. Creates a stream of golden shooting stars that assail the area. It is said that long ago, the Greater Will sent a golden star bearing a beast into the lands between, which would later become the Elden Ring. Remembrance of the natural born. Remembrance of Estelle, natural born of the void, hewn into the Erd tree. A malformed star born in the lightless void far away, once destroyed an eternal city and took away their sky. A falling star of ill omen. Bastards, stars, flail which deals magic damage, having been imbued with power by the remembrance of Estelle. Formed of the same many-colored star debris that comprised the form of the natural born of the void. Meteoric ore blade, katana forged from meteoric ore to dispatch life forms born of falling stars. The blade is weighty, known to deliver slashes of such ferocity that the impact is said to resemble the crash of a falling meteor. Star Scourge Heirloom. A talisman engraved with a scene from a heroic tale. The mightiest hero of the demigods confronted the falling stars alone, and thus did he crush them, his conquest sealing the very fate of the stars. Falling star beast jaw. Part of a falling star beast's jaw, hard and shining black, fashioned into a weapon. Gravitational missile. One of the Glintstone sorceries that manipulates gravitational forces. Said to have originated in the lightless dark far beyond, the home of the falling star beasts. Alabaster Lord's sword. Great sword forged from a blue-white meteoric ore. The blade conceals gravity manipulating magic. A weapon unique to the Alabaster Lords, a race of ancients with skin of stone who were said to have risen to life when a meteor struck long ago. What all of these items have in common is that they portray falling stars not just as random bits of cosmic junk as they are in our real world, but as living things from the far void of space, living things which can be quite malicious. In the world of Elden Ring, the stars are very much alive, and they occasionally crash into the lands between as meteors. Keep this in mind as we move forward. Onto the Haima Conspectus. Let's read the relevant items. Haima Glintstone Crown increases intelligence and strength to the detriment of FP. Scholars of the Haima Conspectus sought the power to quell conflict, and to this end studied the sorceries of Cannon Fire and the Gavel. Gavel of Haima, one of the Glintstone sorceries of the Academy of Raya Lucaria, creates a magical great hammer and slams it down. Drawn from the scholarly Conspectus of Haima, the adjudicator of the Academy. This sorcery employs might as a means to quell conflict. Cannon of Haima, one of the Glintstone sorceries of the Academy of Raya Lucaria, lobs an explosive magic projectile that flies in an arc. Drawn from the Conspectus of Haima, the adjudicator of the Academy, this sorcery employs might as a means to quell conflict. Stone Club, signature weapon of battle mages, hewn from hard glintstone. This club is much heavier than its size suggests, but has no magic power, so that they not lose sight of the true essence of combat. Battle mages prefer to feel the impact of their blows, fighting their opponents hand to hand. Battle Mage Robe, robe worn by scholars of the Academy of Raya Lucaria, tattered from being worn on the battlefield. Whenever war broke out and the Academy sealed its gates, only Haima's scholars dared venture outside. Seclusion is no way to foster discovery. It is only a convenient form of escape. Battle Mage Hugh's Ashes, ashen remains in which spirits yet dwell, used to summon the spirit of Battle Mage Hughes. Hughes came from Celia to study the Haima Conspectus at the Academy, where he became a battle mage. Haima scholars seek to quell conflict with cannon fire and the gavel, but Hughes developed a longing for it. So the Haima Conspectus was chosen by sorcerers who wished to become battle mages. These battle mages were comfortable leaving the Academy during times of war, confident in their magical abilities of cannon fire and bludgeoning gavels. They were expected to use their violent powers responsibly, however, only using their might as a means to end conflict, not initiate or prolong it. Though, as we saw with Battle Mage Hughes, some may have forgotten this vow and come to crave battle. And I'll take another small diversion here before we get to the last couple of conspectuses, for this corruption of Hughes reflects a wider theme of the Raya Lucaria sorcerers abandoning their old vows and codes. Let's look at the robes they wear. Raya Lucarian robe, robe worn by Raya Lucaria's magic scholars. Those who dedicate themselves to the study of glintstone formed from starry amber receive this modest yet elegant deep blue garb, along with their vows of virtue and austerity. But with extended life, one is apt to forget old vows. And this description hints that the sorcerers at large have forgotten their vows of virtue and austerity, because they all live extended lives. We know that Queen Marika plucked the Rune of Death from the Golden Order, or from the Elden Ring under her Golden Order, preventing people from truly dying. But even before this, the sorcerers had discovered a way themselves to live unnaturally long lives. During the Sorceress Sellen questline, which we will discuss more later, she asks you to remove something called a primal glintstone from her body. Let's read the relevant items. Primal glintstone blade, an old glintstone blade that has been stained with blood. the old sorcerers would slice open their hearts with these blades to imbue a primal glintstone with their soul, and thus did they die. Sellen's primal glintstone. Glintstone from within the sorceress Sellen's body. Seemingly half alive, blood vessels are visible within. In essence, a primal glintstone is a sorcerer's soul. If transplanted into a compatible new body after their original body dies, the sorcerer will rise again. My apprentice, do you think it distasteful? So, sorcerers were cutting out their hearts and pouring their souls into special glintstones, allowing for functional immortality even before America removed the Rune of Death from the Elden Ring. With this in mind, the line from the Raya Lucarian robe about extended life making people forget old vows suggests that the sorcerers, blessed or cursed with long life from their primal glintstones, have all abandoned their vows of virtue and austerity. Keep that in mind as we explore deeper into the lore of Raya Lucaria, because we're going to see some sorcerers doing some things that seem quite unvirtuous. And this is a possible explanation for why that is. They've lived so long that they've become corrupted. And this is a common theme in Hidetaka Miyazaki's games, going back to Dark Souls at least, that life is inevitably corrupted if it refuses to meet its natural death. But anyway, let's get back to the Conspectuses. Next up is the Lazuli Conspectus. Lazuli Glintstone Crown increases intelligence and dexterity to the detriment of HP. Scholars of the Lazuli Conspectus study carrion sorceries, a heterodox pursuit that views the moon as equal to the stars. Lazuli Robe worn by scholars of the Lazuli Conspectus. Singular among the greater Raya Lucaria Academy. These scholars, who sought to master carrion sorcery, instead learned to see the moon as equal to the stars. This robe, in the hue of the full moon, signifies their heresy. Lazuli Glintstone Sword. A sword with a glintstone in its handcards, wielded by scholars of the Lazuli Conspectus, who seek to master carrion sorcery. Apparently once used as a staff of sorcery, this sword is made of wood. So, these items tell us that the Lazuli Conspectus is a heretical Conspectus that views the moon as equal to the stars. Of course, the sorcerers study the stars, right? So, this Conspectus is unusual in that it studies the moon as well, as of equal importance. We don't know the name of the man who created this Conspectus, but we see a portrait in Raya Lucaria that matches the Lazuli Glintstone Crown's face. So it was presumably created by him. We know that they use wooden swords, which is unusual for Raya Lucaria sorcerers to use swords, but many Carian sorceries summon magical swords, so this is on brand for a sorcerer trying to master that style of sorcery. Also, we will be hearing quite a bit about the Carians in the future, so for now, just know that they are a powerful royal family that lives north of the Academy of Raya Lucaria in Caria Manor, a palatial estate with a wide swath of territory in its grounds. And this is the likely source of the Conspectuses' name, as we can read in Rennala's armor from the DLC that lapis lazuli blue is symbolic of Caria. So, presumably, if lapis lazuli is symbolic of Caria, then as the Conspectus is founded around studying the Carian ways, the Conspectus' name would come from that color. And let's take another detour to explain the significance of this Conspectus and their belief that the moon is equal to the stars. This might be a bit of a long detour, so buckle up, as we are going to return to the very beginnings of sorcery. First, we need to introduce a new group of people, the ancient astrologers. Sword of Night and Flame, Storied Sword and Treasure of Caria Manor, astrologers who preceded the sorcerers established themselves in mountaintops that nearly touched the sky and considered the fire giants their neighbors. Astrologer robe fashioned from supple cloth, worn by those who look to the cosmos above. They read fate in the stars and are said to be heirs of the Glintstone sorcerers. But alas, the night sky no longer cradles fate. And as a side note, I'm quite sure that calling astrologers the heirs of the sorcerers in this item description is incorrect. Either a mistranslation or an oversight. All other indications in the lore suggest that the astrologers came before the sorcerers. Preceptor's big hat. Large hat with the movements of the stars drawn on the inside of the brim, worn by the magic preceptors who served the Carian royals. Glintstone sorcerers are the descendants of astrologers, a fact that the Carians remain aware of, even if their fate has been long severed from the stars. Telescope, astrology tool used by members of the Carian royal family, a stolen part of a larger instrument. During the age of the Ur Tree, Carian astrology withered on the vine. The fate once writ in the night skies had been fettered by the Golden Order. So from these items we learn that long ago, before the sorcerers existed, astrologers would study the movement of the stars and read fate in what they saw. We also learn that the Carian royal family has a particular connection to these astrologers. Let's look at another item now. Founding Reign of Stars, the eldest primeval sorcery, said to have been discovered by an ancient astrologer, summons a dark cloud of stars overhead. Shortly after, the cloud will release a violent deluge of star rain, thought to be the founding Glintstone sorcery. The glimpse of the primeval current that the astrologer saw became real, and the star's amber rained down on this land. We will get back to that phrase, the primeval current, at the end of the video. But what I want us to notice here is that it seems that whatever this astrologer saw initiated a storm of falling stars onto the land. Based on the spell's name, this might very well have been the first time this ever happened. As in, this might have been the first time Glintstone ever came to the world. But what is the star amber referenced here? Well, it's Glintstone. If you've been paying attention, you might recall a line from the Raya Lucarian robe, which reads, "Those who dedicate themselves to the study of glintstones formed from starry amber." So let's explore this idea. First, let's read the Crimson Amber Medallion. A medallion with crimson amber inlaid. The Erd tree's old sap becomes amber. Treasured as the most precious of jewels in the age of Godfrey, the first Elden Lord. A primordial life energy resides within. So from this, we learn that the Erd tree's amber contains primordial life energy. Now let's look at some dialogue from the Sorceress Sellen, where she explains the nature of Glintstone. Our art draws upon the powers embedded in Glintstone, but what is the nature of such power? Glintstone is the amber of the cosmos. Golden amber contains the remnants of ancient life and houses its vitality, while Glintstone contains residual life and thus the vitality of the stars. It should not be forgotten that Glintstone sorcery is the study of the stars and the life therein, a fact lost on most sorcerers these days. So, what's going on here? Well, we know from the Crimson Amber Medallion that golden amber contains primordial life. Sellen is comparing Glintstone to this amber, saying that Glintstone is the amber of the stars, and therefore contains the stars' life and vitality. The significance of this lore is quite large. Glintstone is not merely a magical rock. It's basically the flesh, the fossilized flesh of alien star beings that live deep in the void of outer space. You know, in other words, when sorcerers stick glintstones onto their staffs and onto their crowns, it's like they're slicing up alien body parts and gluing them onto their clothing and weaponry to use as a power source. But if the glintstones still have actual life in them, that life might be capable of, doing what life does best, right? Growing and reproducing. As Jeff Goldblum says in Jurassic Park, life finds a way. But we will explore those ramifications later in more detail when we discuss the Primeval Current. For now, we've learned that Glintstone is the ember of the stars, and we've learned that sorcerers study the stars for this reason, drawing power from the star life contained in Glintstone. We've also learned that Glintstone sorcerers emerged from the ancient astrologers. We don't know much about the founding of Raya Lucaria. Azure and Lusat are both referred to as founding sorcerers, but I could see this referring to them being some of the first sorcerers in existence, as in the founding Reign of Stars spell, or founders of Raya Lucaria, the Academy, or perhaps simply founders of new categories of sorceries, as they both created new sorceries, Azure founding comet-based spells and Lusat founding meteor-based spells, if their conspectuses are anything to go off. But let's move on, talk about another conspectus, or at least what might be one. The Herodes crown. This is not explicitly stated as a conspectus, but it seems likely that it is the title of one. Or if it's not an official conspectus, then it's just the term for wandering sorcerers. We only find one character wearing the Herodes crown, a fellow named Wilhelm, whom we kill during the Volcano Manor questline. Let's look at the relevant items. Herodes Glintstone crown increases intelligence and endurance to the detriment of FP. The crown of Herodes was granted to scholars who engaged in nomadic study away from the academy. Errant sorcerer robes. Commonplace robe made of thick cloth, worn by the errant sorcerer Wilhelm, one of the first tarnished to visit Round Table Hold. A silent seeker of sorcery who had gone so far as to make contact with the Primeval Current. Wilhelm was led by guidance into confrontation with his friend Vargrim, and it is said that he was then taken prisoner in Round Table Hold. Errant sorcerer manchettes. Commonplace leather manchettes. Their hands are inlaid with dulled glintstone. This is all the information we get about the Herodes crown and its one wearer in the game, Wilhelm, the errant sorcerer. First off, as a side note, it's interesting that the robes say Wilhelm was led into confrontation with Vargrim, because in the Volcano Manor quest, they fight as allies. Perhaps they resolved their dispute while Wilhelm was imprisoned. Second, take note of two things. First, it mentions that Wilhelm had made contact with the Primeval Current. And second, Wilhelm's manchettes talk about his hands being inlaid with dulled glintstone. If you look closely, you will see that the glintstone is fused directly with his flesh, not the leather of the manchettes, as though the glintstone is growing from his skin. We will return to both those pieces of information at the end of the video. Let's move on and talk about the last conspectus, the Twin Sage conspectus. Here are the relevant items. Twin Sage Glintstone crown greatly increases intelligence to the detriment of HP and stamina. Scholars of the Twin Sage Conspectus were the elites of the Academy, permitted to study and excel in sorceries of all kinds. Twin Sage Sorcerer Ashes, ashen remains in which spirits yet dwell, used to summon the spirit of a Twin Sage Sorcerer. Spirit of a Raya Lucaria Sorcerer wearing a stone crown. Those who study the Twin Sage Conspectus are the Academy's elite, capable of mastering the Glintstone Comet Shard and Crystal Burst sorceries. And we can see a pair of twins who are presumably the founders of this conspectus in a portrait at the Academy, though we have no name for them. It's interesting to note that a handful of Twin Sage sorcerers you find around the map actually use a variant of this crown. Instead of having the two twin heads, their crowns mash together the lazuli crown and the olivinus crown. Whether this is just a relic of an old game asset, or an oversight, or an actual piece of lore evidence, I can't say. I don't know quite what it would signify to have the conspectuses that study carrion sorcery combined with the conspectus that studies meteors mashed together to signifies a sorcerer's mastery. Maybe the twins in the portrait each took separately to the lazuli and olivinus conspectuses and eventually shared their knowledge with each other. Perhaps for a time this Twin Sage Conspectus was represented by merging the two crowns, and then in time they were that design was later just replaced by the two twins' heads. But yeah, I really don't know. Regardless, one thing I find interesting from the Twin Sage Glintstone crown is the line that Twin Sage sorcerers were permitted to study sorceries of all kinds, and that use of the word permitted seems to suggest that you had to show a certain level of competency and responsibility before being allowed to study sorceries outside of your conspectus. This could be related to the vows of virtue and austerity that Raya Lucarian sorcerers take. Perhaps you had to be trustworthy enough in both magical ability and virtue to be considered for the Twin Sage Conspectus. Anyway, that covers all the conspectuses. And there is one more Glintstone crown that we haven't talked about, the Witch's Glintstone crown. It's possible that it could reflect another unnamed conspectus, but I'm quite doubtful. I don't think it does. But we'll talk about that crown when we talk about Sorceress Sellen. One last piece of info pertaining to the conspectuses is regarding Thops, the seemingly incapable sorcerer who is trapped outside Raya Lucaria and who just wants to get back in to continue his studies. If we help in his journey, we later find his corpse along with the spell Thops' Barrier, which reads, "The lifelong pursuit of Thops the Bloodstone creates a magic force field that deflects sorceries and incantations. Future generations will learn they will know the foolishness of the sneering sorcerers who ridiculed this theory, little realizing that it was in fact a discovery worthy of a new conspectus of the Academy. So, who knows? Perhaps in the New Age, forged by the Tarnished, who became Elden Lord, the Conspectus of Thops may one day be ubiquitous at the Academy. Perhaps future students will wear glintstone crowns carved in the image of Thops, the once derided Bloodstone. So, we've looked at all the conspectuses of Sorceress Study. These are the allowed fields of research for sorcerers, but other kinds of sorceries do exist. This video is meant to focus on Raya Lucaria and the sorcerers there, so I won't delve too deep into the lore of these so-called heretical sorceries, because there could be a lot to talk about. But let's just run through them quickly, because to fully understand the Academy, we must understand what magic it is opposed to, right? So first, we have thorn sorcery, often referred to as the Briars of Sin. Let's read a couple items related to thorn sorcery. Briars of Sin, an aberrant sorcery discovered by exiled criminals. Theirs are the sorceries most reviled by the Academy. Wounds the caster with thorns of sin, creating a spiral of blood thorns. The guilty, their eyes gouged by thorns, lived in eternal darkness. There they discovered the blood star. Staff of the Guilty, a heretical staff fashioned from a smoldering, withered sapling that turns the blood of sacrifices pierced by it into glintstone, similar to hex magic. One practitioner of thorn sorcery that we meet in the game is Mad Tongue Alberic, whom you might remember as the invader that attacks you when you explore the lower level of the Round Table Hold. He attacks you with the Staff of the Guilty, casting thorn and cold sorceries. We can learn about Alberic from his item set. Alberic's Pointed Hat. Mad Tongue Alberic's Pointed Hat, a sign of a heretical practitioner, set with red glintstones said to be formed by the blood of sacrifices, strengthens thorn sorcery. Alberic was an aloof yet disturbed heretical sorcerer, said to have been driven mad by jeering tongues during his service to the Round Table Hold long ago. More than Alberic's clothing is set with red glintstones, however. If you look at his head, glintstone is bursting from the wraps he has covered his face with, suggesting that it's growing from his own flesh. Remember Wilhelm, the errant sorcerer of the Hirotus Conspectus, who had black glintstone growing from his flesh? There seems to be a connection here, right? And we will delve into that at the end of the video when we talk about the Primeval Current. The last interesting tidbit we learned here is that Alberic's Pointed Hat is a sign of a heretical practitioner. Pointed hats are worn by multiple practitioners of heretical sorcery. And speaking of which, you remember how I said that Alberic uses thorn sorcery and cold sorcery? Well, that is another form of heresy, as seen in the Snow Witch hat. Witch's pointed hat, frigid and frozen through, of a style associated with practitioners of heretical sorcery. Once worn by the snowy crone who the young Ronnie encountered deep in the woods, she was a witch and well versed in cold sorceries. It is said that the doll that houses Ronnie's soul was modeled after her. That old witch was Ronnie's secret mentor. So from this, we learn that the snowy crone who tutored Ronnie was a practitioner of heretical sorcery, suggesting that cold sorcery, like thorn sorcery, is heretical to the Academy. There is one more form of sorcery that we are explicitly told is heretical, and that is death sorcery. Prince of Death's staff, staff embedded with sullied amber, said to be a very part of the Prince of Death. One of the staves deemed heretical by the Academy for its ability to allow sorceries to be augmented through faith in addition to intelligence. This item seems to give us the explanation that the Academy deems sorceries heretical if they can be augmented by faith, not merely intelligence. Which makes sense when you consider the long conflict between Raya Lucaria and the Golden Order, symbolized by the faith of Ratigan versus the intellect of the sorcerers. Raya Lucaria is a place of study, not of faith, and so any sorceress practice that uses faith is seemingly shunned. Presumably, this also means that the lava sorceries of Mount Gelmir are deemed heretical to the Academy, as the Gelmir Glintstone staff describes how magma sorceries are augmented by faith. But anyway, one more thing actually before we move away from the heretical sorceries. We learned that death sorceries are heretical, and we also learned that pointed hats are emblematic of heretical sorcerers. So if you look at Rogier, the death-obsessed sorcerer who wears a pointed hat, he's quite obviously a heretical sorcerer. There is an interesting note here, though, which is that in the original game files, the description of Rogier's hat says that his pointed hat is a sign of a heretical practitioner, but in the final game, they changed the description to just say, Spellblade's pointed hat, Glintstone sorcerer Rogier's traveling attire, graced with an intricate aristocratic decoration. I'm not sure why this description was changed, or if it is even significant that it was, but I thought it was interesting to note. Anyway, that's our little sidebar on heretical sorceries. I will remind you that the Lazuli Conspectus of Raya Lucaria, which studies Carian sorceries, is also described as heretical in the Lazuli robes item we read, even though they are not augmented by faith. So maybe that theory is wrong. But anyway, they are an accepted part of the Academy, the Lazuli Conspectus, despite being described as heretical, so maybe they were only allowed to exist in the Academy thanks to the influence of the Carian Queen Rennala becoming the leader of the Academy. Let's move on to another important element of the Academy, which is the Knights of the Cuckoo, an order of mercenary knights who worked for the Academy. Let's look at some relevant items. Scholar's Armament, one of the Glintstone sorceries of the Academy of Raya Lucaria, taught to the Knights of the Cuckoo by the Academy as payment for their contract. Raya Lucaria Soldier Ashes, used to summon the spirits of 3 Raya Lucaria soldiers, a trio of spirits consisting of 2 disposable foot soldiers and their superior. The soldiers of Raya Lucaria were also known as the Cuckoos. They were given free rein by the Academy to wage war as they pleased, and they were infamous for their rapacious ways. Cuckoo Surcoat, armor worn by Raya Lucaria Academy soldiers. The surcoat depicts twinned cuckoos peering into a flourishing mass of glintstone. To a glintstone sorcerer, the body is a transient thing. The cuckoo alone knows its insignificance, yet watches over it all the same. Cuckoo Knight Armor, armor worn by Raya Lucaria Academy Knights. Its left breast is emblazoned with a peering cuckoo, whence came their name. Perhaps the bird's shrewd gaze is an expression of their refusal to be mere servants of the Academy. Cuckoo Great Shield, metal great shield painted with a peering cuckoo, carried by the enchanted knights sworn to the Academy. Boasting high magic damage negation, this shield is used to hunt down mages. Quote, "Our enemy is none other than Caria itself." End quote. Cuckoo Glintstone, lump of broken glintstone enwreathed with magic power. A faux sorcery used by the Knights of the Cuckoo. Albinoric Pot, craftable item prepared using a ritual pot, enchanted by sorceries of the Cuckoos. The Knights of the Cuckoos do declare, "Behold thy defiled blood, unlike any humor that flows in our grand realm." The Knights of the Cuckoo. From these lore items, we know that they were rapacious mercenaries hired by the Academy and paid, at least in part, with sorceress arts. The sorcerers of the Academy allowed the knights to wage war as they pleased, apparently unconcerned with the Cuckoo's actions, as long as they protected the Academy. The line about the cuckoo alone knowing the insignificance of a sorcerer's body indicates to me that the Cuckoos knew the sorcerers could body hop with primal glintstone rituals. We also learn that the Cuckoos apparently hated Albinorics, declaring their blood defiled, which on a personal level disgusts me, because I am the world's #1 lover of Albinaurics. They are my boys, and anybody who hates Albinaurics, I got a problem with them. Anyway, the great shield item quotes the Cuckoo saying, "Our enemy is none other than Caria itself," which we know is the royal family that ruled the Academy under the leadership of Queen Rennala. So we have a pretty solid basis of understanding of the Academy now. We've covered a lot of lore about it. It's a school of sorcerers who study the stars and draw power from the life energy of the stars contained in Glintstone. They are descended from the ancient astrologers, and they divide themselves into schools of study called Conspectuses. We know that the Academy employed rapacious mercenary knights called the Cuckoos, who terrorized the surrounding country. We also know that founding sorcerers like Azor and Lusant were major figures in the history of the Academy, and they lent their faces to the Conspectuses they founded. It seems likely anyways. Were they governors of the Academy? I don't know. The only governor of the Academy that's explicitly named in the lore, as far as I know, is Rennala, the Carrion Queen. And you know what? This is a good time to talk about her. Let's talk about Rennala and the whole question of who rules the Academy. We don't know much about the Academy's early history, but we know that at some point Rennala took it over, so let's look at some items for that lore. Stargazer Heirloom, a talisman engraved with the legend of a queen. The young astrologer gazed at the night sky as she walked. She'd always chased the stars every step of her journey. Then she met the full moon, and in time, the astrologer became a queen. Rennala's full moon, sorcery associated with the Carrion Queen. Queen Rennala encountered this enchanting moon when she was young, and later it would bewitch the Academy. Remembrance of the full moon queen. Remembrance of Rennala, queen of the full moon. In her youth, Rennala was a prominent champion who charmed the Academy with her lunar magic, becoming its master. She also led the Glintstone Knights and established the House of Caria as royalty. Telescope, astrology tool used by members of the Carrion royal family. During the age of the Erd Tree, Carrion astrology withered on a vine. The fate once writ in the night skies had been fettered by the Golden Order. So, these items tell us that Rennala was an astrologer, and indeed that astrology was a tradition for the House of Caria, of which Rennala was a part and which she established as royalty. In her studies of the stars, however, she encountered the full moon and developed lunar magic, a new form of sorcery. This lunar sorcery would become foundational to the Carians, as we see other Carians like Rellana, the Twin Moon Knight, and Ronnie the Witch study lunar magic, as shown in the following spells. Rellana's Twin Moons. sorcery of Rennala, the Twin Moon Knight, associated with a Carian princess. Incarnate overlapping twin moons, which strike the ground one after the other, violently shaking the earth with moonlight. In her childhood, she and her elder sister Rennala met these moons, overlapping as though nestled against one another. Rani's Dark Moon, legendary sorcery associated with the Carian Queen. This moon was encountered by a young Rani, led by the hand of her mother Rennala. What she beheld was cold, dark, and veiled in occult mystery. Critically, we learn from these items that Rennala charmed the Academy with her lunar magic. The moon, as her eponymous spell says, bewitched the Academy. It seems that, just as the Stargazer heirloom described Rennala chasing the stars, but then meeting the moon and making that the primary object of her reverence, Rennala's moon similarly overwhelmed the sorcerers of the Academy, and this was likely the moment that Rennala became the governor of the Academy. This may have also been when the Academy was named the Academy of Raya Lucaria, which, as I mentioned earlier, translates to something like the Academy of the Carian Royals. So if Rennala founded the House of Caria as royalty, and also charmed the Academy with her potent sorcery, it seems likely that the Academy was renamed in her honor when she took it over. There is much more to say about Rennala's governorship and the fallout from her assuming leadership, but that comes later in the timeline. First, let's look at another element that we learned about from these lore items. We learned from her remembrance that Rennala founded the Glintstone Knights. This is the only time that specific phrase is used, but I believe it refers to the Carian Knights. We see multiple Carian Knights throughout the game, including Moonrithil from the DLC, who served as Rellana's Chamberlain. Rellana, the Twin Moon Knight, is Rennala's younger sister, by the way. And Bowls, a troll Carian Knight locked up in the Cuckoo's Everjail in Liurnia. Judging by the name, I assume this means he was captured by the Cuckoo Knights and imprisoned, for the Cuckoos were enemies of the Carians, as we know. Bowls is not unique, by the way, as an ally of Caria. Apparently, a group of trolls swore an oath to serve the Carians, as described in the Troll Knight's sword item. Troll Knight's sword. Great sword embedded with a blue glintstone. Weapon of the trolls in service to the royal family of Caria. Called into service when the queen invoked an oath they swore, the trolls are treated as true knights of Caria and fight arm in arm with their human comrades. These Carian knights were unmatched warriors, combining martial prowess with sorceress abilities. we can read some relevant items. Carrion Knight Armor. Armor of the enchanted knights that once served the Carrion royal family. The enchanted knights, anointed by the Lunar Queen, were heroes of the highest honor, but fell into disarray with the decline of the royal family. Carrion Knight's sword, straight sword embedded with a blue glintstone, weapon of knights sworn to Carrion royalty. These knights' swords could serve as catalysts, letting them wield sorceress battle skills. Despite numbering fewer than 20, this power made them a match for even the champions of gold in battle. Carrion Knight's shield, a teardrop-shaped shield embedded with blue glintstones, carried by knights who served the Carrion royal family. Excels when facing magic or holy attacks. Just who were these knights preparing to fight? Royal Magic Grease. Solidified knot grease made from a mixture of magically resonant materials. Craftable item. Coats armament, adding heavy magic damage to attacks. Believed to have once been bestowed upon low-ranking Carrion Knights in lieu of the Fellowship's characteristic swords. So, we learn from these items that the Carrion Knights were world-class warriors, capable of standing against even the champions of the Golden Order, which included such legendary warriors as red-haired Ratigan himself, the second Elden Lord. The knights would in fact come head-to-head with the warrior host of the Erdtree in a pair of conflicts known as the First and Second Liurnian Wars. While Godfrey, first Elden Lord, was busy subjugating the Weeping Peninsula and leading an army against the giants of the mountains, Ratigan was marching on Liurnia. 2 sword monuments in Liurnia testify to this invasion. The first reads, "The First Liurnian War. Ratigan's glory burns red as his hair." And the second reads, "The Second Liurnian War. No victory for the Golden, nor for the Moon. No prize but atonement, the birth of a vow." Muriel, Pastor of Vows, explains these events in more detail, saying, "Lord Ratigan was a great champion, possessed of flowing red locks. He came to these lands at the head of a great golden host when he met Lady Rennala in battle. He soon repented his territorial aggressions, though, and became husband to the Carrion Queen. It is here, at the Church of Vows, that the great houses of the Erdtree and the Moon were joined, and so our church holds in view the monuments of both houses, the Erdtree of the capital and the Academy of Raya Lucaria." So, after Rennala took over Raya Lucaria, Ratigan attempted to conquer Liurnia, but the war ended when Ratigan instead married Rennala. Their children would grow up to be demigods, including the great General Radahn, the blasphemous Praetor Rykard, and the cunning Empyrean witch, Rani. Muriel continues the story, saying, "However, when Godfrey, first Elden Lord, was hounded from the lands between, Radagon left Rennala to return to the Erd Tree capital, becoming Queen Marika's second husband and king consort, taking the title of Second Elden Lord. The mystery endures to this day as to why Lord Radagon would cast Lady Rennala aside, and moreover, why a mere champion would be chosen for the seat of Elden Lord. Lady Rennala is queen, head of the Carian royal family, and governor of the Academy of Raya Lucaria, the great and beautiful full moon witch. Sadly, her heart was broken when Lord Radagon left her, and then, when the Academy rebelled against the royals, she was locked away in the Grand Library. So, we've learned that Radagon left Rennala to go marry Queen Marika after she banished Godfrey, and that this betrayal broke Rennala. The proof of which we see when we encounter her in Raya Lucaria, finding her obsessively reincarnating a horde of malformed children, and hardly even able to defend herself, protected only by a magical defense mechanism created by her daughter Rani, which summons this sort of a phantasmic version of Rennala, which is no doubt modeled after the queen in her prime. The shattering of Rennala's mind is also attested to in her armor set. For instance, the queen's robe reads, "Robe indicating the highest order of sorcerer, worn by Rennala, queen of the full moon." When Rennala, head of both the Academy of Raya Lucaria and the Carian royal family, lost her husband Radagon, her heart went along with him. And then those at the Academy realized that Rennala was no champion after all. And that line about those at the Academy realizing that Rennala was no champion after all brings us to our next major event. I just read the line from Muriel where he said, "And then, when the Academy rebelled against the royals, she, Rennala, was locked away in the Grand Library." It seems that when the Academy realized Rennala was no real champion, they decided that she was not worthy of being their leader. Whatever charming power Rennala held over the sorcerers, with her lunar magic faded away, and the sorcerers, along with their hired mercenaries, the Knights of the Cuckoo, turned against Rennala and the Carian royal family at large. We see evidence of the brutality that came with this rebellion in northern Liurnia, where the king's realm ruins were reduced to rubble by the Knights of the Cuckoo. War Counselor E.G. gives us more detail, saying, "This territory once belonged to the Carian royal family. Their manor lies not far beyond this point. When the Raya Lucaria Academy turned on the Carians, the Knights of the Cuckoo descended on this tract. After leveling it, they carried on to the manor. The Carians were taken off guard, but their strength had not waned, and they repelled the knight's onslaught by conjuring an enchanted snare that remains potent to this day. That is why I say, Tarnished, don't go near the manor unless you wish to lie with the corpses of the heedless knights of the Cuckoo. So, Carian Manor itself survived the Sorceress Coup, but what of Rennala herself? Well, as Muriel said, she was locked away in the grand library of the Academy. At first, I thought this meant that Rennala was imprisoned by the Academy's sorcerers, but after looking at the evidence more, I have come to a different conclusion. She's actually being protected in the library. It's not a prison for her so much as it is the last safe haven in the Academy. Not only is she protected by the magical trap set up by Ronnie, which I mentioned earlier, but she is also guarded by Moongrum, a Carian knight, which you'll recall earlier I said were basically super soldiers. Let's look at one of those items again, the Carian Knight's Shield, which says that it excels when facing magic or holy attacks. Just who were these knights preparing to fight? The description points out that the Carian Knights were specifically prepared to fight against wielders of magic and holy energy. The defense against holy attacks no doubt suggests them preparing for another war with the Golden Order, but the defense against magic suggests to me that the Carians had long been preparing for the potential of an Academy rebellion, or at least for battle with powerful sorcerers who took issues with Rennala's management style. A topic we will explore more when we talk about Sorceress Sellen. So, the upshot of all this is that Moongrum is a world-class soldier specifically prepared to fight sorcerers, and he's defending his queen from an academy of sorcerers. He's the best man for the job. With Moongrum still alive and guarding the only path to his queen, my guess is that the sorcerers of the Academy just didn't think it was worth it to sacrifice the resources and lives necessary to break through Moongrum and actually apprehend Rennala personally. I can't imagine a bunch of sorceress academics were enthused about taking on Moongrum, not to mention Ronnie's trap, especially since it seems that the Cuckoo Knights were largely destroyed in the attack on Caria Manor. You can certainly find handfuls of them around Liurnia, but in my opinion, they seem relatively sparse compared to what I would expect, so it sort of leads me to believe that their order's numbers were greatly depleted in the coup against the Carians. So, in the end, it seems to me that Rennala was left in the heart of enemy territory, too broken to mount an escape, yet well enough protected that she was in no real danger from the sorcerers that she previously ruled. So, that brings us to the modern day. Rennala was left broken in the library, and the sorcerers sealed the gates of the Academy shut after the shattering. But why did the sorcerers want to rebel against Rennala? We get the line about how they realized that she was no champion, so perhaps they simply decided she wasn't worthy, but there is is another reason that some sorcerers hold a grudge against her. And we learn about this from Sorceress Sellen, who we've talked about a few times briefly, or mentioned anyways. So, let's dive into Sorceress Sellen. The Glintstone Thops gives us background on her, saying Sellen was well known, the most promising sorceress in the history of the Academy. I followed her at school, but there may as well have been an ocean between us. But Sellen was expelled from the Academy, accused of unthinkable treatment of certain sorcerers under the name of the Graven Witch. I still don't believe the accusations. The illustrious Sellen would never do such things. Sellen was indeed banished from the Academy, as corroborated by Soluvis, who says, "There's a Glintstone sorcerer by the name of Sellen in Limgrave. She owes me for the help I gave her when she was expelled from the Academy." Despite this help, Sellen apparently does not care for Soluvis very much, saying, "Soluvis is not a name I ever wanted to hear again." And if you know anything about Soluvis, you understand why he is an unsavory character. He has a habit of turning living people into puppet slaves that serve his every command, and it is heavily implied that he sleeps with these so-called puppets. There is an item that alludes more to the relationship between Sellen and Soluvis, a note called The Preceptor's Secret. Note sold by a nomadic merchant imparting knowledge in brief. Preceptor Soluvis is hiding a dirty secret in a cellar among the ruins not far from the Sisters 3. The vile Graven Witch seems to be a frequent visitor to that place. And so we encounter a strange, seeming contradiction. Soluvis tells us that he helped Sellen when she was expelled from the Academy, suggesting their time together was in the distant past, and Sellen saying that she had hoped to never hear Soluvis's name again seems to me to suggest also that they had not seen each other for a long time, and that she had hoped they never would again. So why does the note say that the Graven Witch, which we know is a pseudonym for Sellen, is a frequent visitor to Soluvis's cellar? The answer is found in the cellar, where we find a hidden chamber containing a woman dressed up like Sellen. Her face is different than Sellen's, a fact which I learned from Zully the Witch's YouTube channel, where she unmasks various NPCs. So I will put a link to Zully's channel in the description, and to that video where she takes the mask off and you can see the NPC underneath. But yeah, so her face is different from Sellen's face that we meet, but her glintstone crown depicting a gentle-looking woman covers that up. You can't see that normally. And it seems to me that people may have seen this woman wearing Sellen's iconic glintstone crown and assumed that it was the Graven Witch herself, rather than a woman simply wearing Sellen's clothes. I'll take a moment to read this crown's description. Witch's glintstone crown. This gentle-looking crown was granted to a scholar who excelled in her studies, which also merited the title of witch. For some time, I thought that this meant this was the crown given to witches at the Academy. But considering the fact that we only see 2 characters wear this crown, the 2 being Sellen and the puppet in Sylva's basement, combined with the fact that the puppet in the basement is thought to be Sellen because of the crown, or presumably because of the crown, I've come around to thinking that this crown was specifically made for Sellen and that it was only worn by her. That it wasn't a common crown anyways. If it was so associated with Sellen that the nomadic merchant's note assumes that the person in Sylva's basement is Sellen. But yeah, with that conclusion in mind, it seems to me that the help Sylva's gave to Sellen after she was expelled from the Academy was perhaps obtaining a puppet body that he would hold on to on Sellen's behalf. As I said earlier, sorcerers could use primal glintstone to extend their lives, hopping from body to body by transferring their primal glintstone to a fresh vessel. Sellen does this, as shown in her quest when we transfer her primal glintstone into the puppet in Sylva's basement. My thinking is that Sylva's, with his knowledge of creating puppets, created a replacement body for Sellen, a fallback option in case something went wrong for her, which, of course, it eventually did. That's just a personal theory, however, and it may be incorrect. Sylva's could be keeping the puppet just because he's a pervert. What I mean by that is, disturbingly, it seems that Sylva's is having his way with the Sellen puppet in the basement, given that we find it in a hidden room in the basement with a bed inside, and given Sylva's predilections for dolly bothering, as Gideon says. But we don't need to linger on that thought. To summarize what we've learned so far, Sellen was one of the greatest sorcerers at the Academy of Raya Lucaria, seemingly even appearing in portraits alongside the greatest mages in the school, including the Conspectus founders like Azur and Lusat. In those portraits, the woman in the portrait looks similar to Sellen's current body, but it's hard to say if it's supposed to represent that body or if it is a different character entirely. I do believe that it is Sellen. I just mean it might be a different body because Sellen has presumably been body hopping for many years, and so her glintstone crown might depict her original body, or at least a body she had from a long time ago. But yeah, we can reasonably infer even beyond those portraits that Sellen must be quite powerful. For instance, she is chained up, her body is chained up in the Witchbane ruins, having been captured at some point after she was expelled from the Academy, and yet she is somehow projecting her image across the lands between to the Waypoint ruins, where you meet her and begin her questline. But anyway, Sellen tells tells us why she was expelled from the Academy, saying, "I was exiled from the Academy of Raya Lucaria. It was for attempting to restore the Primeval Current of Glintstone sorcery. The toothless pedantry peddled by the Carrion royal family can rot for all I care. I want Glintstone sorceries that open our minds, unbound by terrestrial taboos, no matter what we give in return. My apprentice, I presume nothing. Teacher and student are not bound to tread the same path. But hear me out, my apprentice. I need your help to restore the Primeval Current of Glintstone sorcery." And so we finally come to the Primeval Current of Glintstone sorcery, which has been referenced a number of times in this video so far. Before we really dive into that, however, let's just go ahead and finish up with Sellen. All we need to know about the Primeval Current right now is that it is a field of Glintstone sorcery that Sellen supports studying. However, study of this field was seemingly banned under the leadership of Queen Rennala, as hinted at by Sellen, saying that she was expelled for trying to restore it. It is also suggested when Sellen is implanted into her new body, because she says, "Finally, I can return to the Academy to expel the Carrion royal family and restore the Primeval Current," suggesting that it was the Carrions who banned study of the Primeval Current. The Graven Mass talisman also refers to the Primeval Current being a forbidden tradition of Glintstone sorcery, perhaps forbidden by Rennala. And Jaren, a compatriot of the Carrions, says of Sellen, "She was known as the Graven Witch, obsessed by the Primeval Current. Countless sorcerers fell to her hands. The most dangerous mage in the entire history of Raya Lucaria's Academy," which depicts, the Carrion perspective on the matter, I suppose. If you help Sellen take charge at the Academy and restore the Primeval Current, she asks you to find the bodies of Azur and Lusat, the two primeval sorcerers who we learned about earlier for founding Conspectuses. Sellen tells us that both of them were expelled from the Academy just like she was, saying, "Master Lusat is another founding Glintstone sorcerer, and like Master Azur, he was banished from the Academy." While it is not explicitly stated, it seems likely that the sorcerers were banished for studying the Primeval Current, as their item sets tell us that they pursued that study. I'll read the relevant items so you can see what has become of these sorcerers. Azur's Glintstone robe, a robe reserved for Grandmasters at the Academy of Raya Lucaria, corroded by blue-green glintstones. Since the Grandmasters Azur and Lusat were driven from the Academy, no one has achieved their formerly held rank. Azur's Glintstone crown, crown of Azur, Primeval Current sorcerer, set with a prominent blue-green glintstone. This crown replaced Azur's brain and skull altogether, and now, removed from his body, it is all but dead. What power remains within raises the potency of Azur's Primeval Current sorceries at the cost of additional FP consumption. Azur's manchettes corroded by blue-green glintstones, worn by Azur, Primeval Current sorcerer, Azure had reached a near inorganic state. Comet Azure, legendary sorcerer devised by Azure, primeval sorcerer, fires a tremendous comet in a torrent akin to the distant starry expanse, the place said to be the origin of Glintstone. When Azure glimpsed into the primeval current, he saw darkness. He was left both bewitched and fearful of the abyss. Stars of Ruin, legendary sorcery devised by Lusat, primeval sorcerer. When Lusat glimpsed into the primeval current, he beheld the final moments of a great star cluster, and upon seeing it, he too was broken. We will return to the Grandmasters shortly when we discuss the primeval current. But first, Sellen has another task for us. We have to transfer her primal glintstone to a fresh body, as her current body is imprisoned in the Witchbane ruins. She says, "My apprentice, thank you for coming. These shackles take a toll on us all. There is something I need you to look after. My primal glintstone. A star has fallen, and my fortunes waver. Someone may come for my life, and so I entrust it with you, myself." The fallen star is due to us defeating Radon at the Red Mane Festival. Radon was holding the stars in place, and thus holding fate in place. For in the world of Elden Ring, as we established, these stars relate to fate. This evidence appears in many items, but Sellen, for example, says, "The stars alter the fate of the Carrion royal family." But yeah, once Radon died and fate resumed, Sellen knew she was in danger, and she asks us to transfer her primal glintstone to a new body. Her fears are well-founded, as witch hunter Jaren soon arrives and kills her imprisoned body, though he recognizes that she has fallen back on old tricks and hopped into a new body, saying, "It is strange though, the woman, she was like a husk, her soul already fled. I suspect Sellen lives on, elsewhere. I'm sure she'll turn up eventually, in another body." A sickening thought, but one that won't stop gnawing at me. With all the pieces in place, Sellen takes control of Raya Lucaria, deposing Rennala and restoring the study of the primeval current, saying, "With the bodies of masters Azure and Lusat returned, the Academy can hone the primeval current, so that we, fallen children of the stars, shall beam with brilliance once again." When we return to Sellen after this, however, we find her in a strange new form, her glintstone crown set into a mass of other glintstone crowns floating in a sphere above the ground. You may have encountered this enemy type around the lands between. They are called a school of graven mages, and it was the creation of these spheres that earned Sellen her title of the Graven Witch. Let's look into these disturbing creations by reading the Graven School Talisman, a talisman depicting a school of graven mages, the nightmare of the Academy. The primeval current is a forbidden tradition of glintstone sorcery. To those who cleave to its teachings, the act of collecting sorcerers to fashion them into the seeds of stars is but another path of scientific inquiry. Graven, by the way, is a sort of archaic word that means carved. To grave means to carve something into a hard surface. You're probably familiar with the more common variant, engrave, as in he engraved a name on the door, which means basically the same thing. Let's look at that description a bit more, particularly the line, "The act of collecting sorcerers to fashion them into the seeds of stars is but another path of scientific inquiry." Fashioning sorcerers into the seeds of stars, what could that mean? Well, we've already learned that there are living things in the stars and in the void of space, and we've learned that Glintstone sorcerers study that life and draw power from it. Let's look at something said by County Mere, an NPC from the DLC, Shadow of the Erd Tree. County Mere is a proficient Glintstone sorcerer who once taught Rennala, the Carrion Queen, as referenced in his High Priest hat. The hat of Count Ymir, High Priest. The circular design at the top represents the greater will and its lightless abyss, imparting increased intelligence and arcane to the wearer. Though Count Ymir instructed Rennala in the sorcerer's arts, he abandoned his allegiance to the moon. Quote, "It was merely the closest of the celestial bodies, nothing more." End quote. But, anyways, Count Ymir says the following line of dialogue. "I, too, am a Glintstone sorcerer. We study the stars and examine the life therein. Are you familiar with our findings? Long ago, we began as stardust, born of a great rupture across the skies. We, too, are children of the greater will. Is that not divine? Is that not sublime?" Compare this to Sellen explaining why she wishes to restore the Primeval Current, saying, "The Academy can hone the Primeval Current so that we, fallen children of the stars, shall beam with brilliance once again." So, there seems to be a theory here that because all people are actually born of the stars, born of stardust, they can be merged together into the seed of a star, something that might grow into an actual star one day. Perhaps Sellen believes that people can be stripped of their impurities by being merged into these graven schools, and thus maybe returned to the state of cosmic life that their ancient ancestors' stars experienced long ago. Because these graven masses are called only the seeds of stars, I imagine that these floating spheres are only the beginning of the process, not the end. And if you look at the upgraded Graven School Talisman, which is called the Graven Mass Talisman, the first line of its description reads, "A talisman depicting the first school of Graven Mages." So, this depicts the very first school of Graven Mages, and if you look at the talisman's art, it is sprouting with crystal in a way that we don't see with the Graven schools, as though it had grown in a way that the Graven schools we fight in-game have yet to grow. This might suggest that the Graven masses really are seeds, and that over time they can grow into a new form. In the end, I can't say for sure whether I think Sellen regrets what happened to her or not, being transformed into a graven school. She's hardly able to speak, and she offers no explicit opinion. Is she in horrible, regretful agony, or is she happy to finally be the seed of a star that will one day grow into a cosmically brilliant being? I'm more inclined to believe that things didn't go quite the way she planned. After all, she talks with the Tarnished about all her plans for once the Tarnished becomes Elden Lord, but in her current state, such future plans seem impossible. Although she can still speak somewhat in her new form. I mean, maybe we will come back and teach her about the secrets of life revealed in the Elden Ring. I don't know. Oh, and before we move on from Sellen, I'll just throw out a couple of my crackpot ideas. First, I suspect that Sellen is a carrion royal, is a member of the carrion family. E.G. calls her a carrion weed at one point, which is somewhat ambiguous because he could be saying that she is a weed to the carrions, or he could be saying that she is a carrion that is a weed. I don't know. But she also fights with a carrion glintstone staff, and the falling star that resumes Ronnie's fate also resumes Sellen's fate, divesting her of her immortality, which is why Jaren goes to kill her after the star falls. So I won't dive into that idea because it's not really relevant to this video, but it's a fun thought that I wanted to share. My other crackpot Sellen theory is that, just like it seems, Rennala is a very old figure, that she was once an astrologer before the Glintstone sorcerers even existed. My other crackpot Sellen theory is that she is the founding Glintstone sorcerer, the very first one, because in combat she uses the spell Founding Rain of Stars, which is the eldest primeval sorcery. And she could be very old if she was doing her sorcerer body hopping. So, anyway, those are just a couple of crackpot theories that I'm not going to dive into here, but I just wanted to reference because they're fun to think about. So, with Sellen's story ended, let's delve into the final topic for this video, the Primeval Current. What is it, and why are powerful sorcerers like Sellen, Azure, and Lusat interested in it? Let's talk about an enemy in the game, the Crystallians, and see what some items have to say about them. Shattering Crystal, sorcery of the mysterious Crystallians, creates a mass of crystal, then shatters it in a forward burst. The Crystallians are inorganic beings, yet they live. They cleave close to the ideals of the Primeval Current, and as such, they are revered guests of the sorcerers. Crystal Staff. Staff fashioned from pure crystal, a deed impossible for a human, enhances Crystallian sorceries. The Crystallian's faint cognition is known as the Wisdom of Stone. This staff can only be wielded by those of intellect high enough to grasp grasp such wisdom. So, these mysterious crystal people cleave close to the ideals of the primeval current, and their cognition is called the wisdom of stone. Some sorcerers were interested particularly in this wisdom of stone, and formed a group called the Crystal Cadre, as evidenced by the spells they developed. Crystal Burst, one of the Glintstone sorceries of the Academy of Raya Lucaria, fires a burst of glintstone crystal shards. This sorcery can be cast repeatedly and while in motion. A sorcery of the Crystal Cadre, a group of sorcerers who pursued the wisdom of stone, the secrets locked in the faint cogitation of the Crystallians. So, living beings made of crystal, and the spells developed by those who studied them, fire glintstone shards, suggesting that the Crystallians are made of glintstone themselves. As we've learned, glintstone contains primordial star life, so it seems that the Crystallians are that glintstone come alive. Whatever life is in glintstone seems to have developed into a mobile, intelligent form, in the form of the Crystallians. As we know from Azure and Lusat's items, they peered into the primeval current, but it also seems that they had come to understand the wisdom of stone, as evidenced by the lore in their staff items, which reads, Azure's Glintstone Staff, staff of the primeval Glintstone sorcerer Azure. Only those who have glimpsed what lies beyond the wisdom of stone may wield it. And so, if their staffs could only be wielded by those who saw beyond the wisdom of stone, we can assume that they both had understood the wisdom of stone. Does peering into the primeval current allow you to understand the wisdom of stone? Does it teach you what the Crystallians know? Or is it the other way around? Do you need to grasp the wisdom of stone first in order to be able to peer into the primeval current? Regardless, let's start sifting some lore about the current. So there are 4 characters who are confirmed to have looked into the primeval current in the lore. Let's look at those 4. So from the Comet Azure item, we read, when Azure glimpsed into the primeval current, he saw darkness. He was left both bewitched and fearful of the abyss. From Stars of Ruin, we read, when Lusat glimpsed into the primeval current, he beheld the final moments of a great star cluster, and upon seeing it, he too was broken. From the Errant Sorcerer robe, we read, worn by the errant sorcerer Wilhelm, a silent seeker of sorcery, who had gone so far as to make contact with the primeval current. And in Founding Reign of Stars, we read, the eldest primeval sorcery, said to have been discovered by an ancient astrologer, thought to be the founding glintstone sorcery, the glimpse of the primeval current that the astrologer saw became real, and the stars' amber rained down on this land. While we don't have any more information about the unnamed founding sorcerer, there's something quite interesting about the other 3 men. They are all turning to stone. On Azure and Lusat, the transformation is quite visually obvious, though on Wilhelm you have to look a little closer. As we talked about earlier, dull black glintstone is sprouting from the flesh of his hands. And, who knows what's growing under that robe or helmet of his. The connection here seems pretty clear to me. Glimpsing the primeval current means that you begin to sprout with the life of stars, meaning you slowly begin to crystallize, your flesh turning into that of the crystallians or any of the other mineral-like beings we encounter from the stars, like the falling star beasts or the onyx lords. There is another NPC that I suspect glimpsed into the primeval current, although it is not confirmed. I'm talking about Mad Tongue Alberic, the invader who attacks you in the Round Table Hold. As I mentioned earlier, it's easy to see that the black cloth wrapped around his head is bursting with red glintstones, as though it's growing out of him. If you buy the fact that that suggests that he glimpsed into the current, then I think it also offers an explanation for why he is mad. The lore states that after glimpsing the current, Azure was left bewitched and fearful, while Lusat was broken. If gazing into the current carries the threat of some kind of mental destabilization, then perhaps Alberic looking into the current drove him mad, as described in his armor set lore, which reads, Alberic's pointed hat. Alberic was an aloof, yet disturbed heretical sorcerer, said to have been driven mad by jeering tongues during his service to the Round Table Hold long ago. Perhaps those jeering tongues were the manifestation of his madness from glimpsing the current. This transformation into Glintstone may not even be a negative from the perspective of the sorcerers themselves. Remember that sorcerers all wear glintstone crowns carved in the shape of heads, and those crown heads have glintstone growing from the scalp, a reflection of what's happening to these characters who are growing glintstone from their bodies. Becoming like Azure and Lusat may be a dream for many sorcerers, or at least maybe an extreme but admirable transformation. These characters are not the only people turning into stone, however. Glimpsing the primeval current may fast-track this transformation, or perhaps it carries along additional power or insight. But we do see other creatures undergoing similar transformations. Look at the Glintstone dragons, for instance. Smaragd, the Glintstone dragon outside the Academy, you get the incantation Smaragd's Glintstone breath from him. Channels the power of Smaragd, the Glintstone dragon. Smaragd was a devourer of sorcerers, and over time his body became corrupted by their glintstones. There are other glintstone dragons, such as Adula, who also sprouts glintstone due to her devouring sorcerers. Consuming the glintstone sorcerers caused the dragons to grow glintstone on their bodies. We can see it sprouting from them, as though the star life in the glintstone was propagating in the dragon's flesh. And do you remember the glintstone miners we spoke about early in the video? Those failed sorcerers who dig up glintstone for the Academy's use. They are all sprouting with glintstone as well. Perhaps they've been breathing in glintstone dust from their mining And, once it gets into their lungs and into their eyes and stuff, it begins to sprout and grow within them and on them. But yeah, there's, I can't truly answer what the Primeval Current is. I don't have a definite answer. At this point, you pretty much know all I do. The game never explicitly says, but my feeling is that it's the sort of progenitor for the life energy in the stars. I've sort of thought of it as being parallel to the primordial crucible, which, you learn about elsewhere in the game lore. It's said that in the primordial crucible, all life was once blended together, and the misbegotten, with their mismatched physical traits, are said to have touched the crucible, and that's why they're all, covered in scales and wings and tails and fur and all sorts of various pieces. The winged misbegotten ashes description says, "The misbegotten are held to be a punishment for making contact with the crucible, and from birth they are treated as slaves, or worse." So if touching the primordial crucible could cause such flesh-based, animal-based physical deformities and transformations, then perhaps touching the primeval current causes crystal-based, mineral-based deformities, sprouting the flesh of alien life forms rather than terrestrial life forms. Even the names are reminiscent of each other to my mind. The primordial crucible and the primeval current. Primordial and primeval are synonyms of each other, after all. Glintstone might be like the microbial life of the primeval current, a sort of fundamental life form that increases in intelligence and complexity as it grows. The Crystallians are described as having faint cognition, and the crystal spear item says, "The inscrutable Crystallians have but one clear purpose, to safeguard their crystals until the end. One theory posits that they yearn for the return of their creator, who will carve for them new brethren." Perhaps they are a sort of intermediary life form generated from the microbial mass of Glintstone, one which has the purpose of safeguarding the rest of their growing crystals, because the life in Glintstone must aggregate in order to reach its final form. They're safeguarding the crystal to midwife some life form from the stars that has yet to be born, like an insect colony that, creates various physical forms to serve different purposes. But, I really can't offer any more insight into the primeval current than that. It is a very mysterious thing, and you'll have to come to your own conclusions. But that brings us to the end of our examination of the lore of Raya Lucaria. We've covered a lot, from the origins of Glintstone sorcery to the political and ideological conflict of the Academy of Raya Lucaria, to the Carrion Royals, to Sorceress Sellen, and all sorts of stuff. So, I hope that you enjoyed, and I will see you next time, my friends. Take care. Goodbye. Goodbye.